Welcome back to Cinema Flicks Music Picks. I'm Davey, your host with the most, the best with the least. Oh, the least I can do today is have a look at the new release from Plumeria Films, an upstart company in the UK who produce these wonderfully esoteric Blu-rays, usually world premieres. Have they all been world premieres? I believe they have. They only have about a half dozen titles so far, but wow. So I want to thank David at Plumeria, who's so kind, sends stuff, and he reuses Jiffy bags so that it's not taken, it helps the environment. Everything's considerate from Plumeria. Support Plumeria, folks. That's your number one takeaway. So 1982, a 26-year-old actor called Tom Hanks is invited to do a TV movie called Mazes and Monsters. Get some glare off of them. So Mazes and Monsters, and you can tell that it's got a kind of, it's almost got a kind of Stranger Thingsy kind of cult cover, doesn't it? And obviously the logo's very Dungeons and Dragons inspired. I'm just going to read you the back here because it sums it up terribly well. Swords, poison, spells, battles, maiming, killing. Adapted from the best-selling novel by Rona Jaffe, which was loosely based on a tragic true story. Yes, and that we will get into that. The made-for-television Mazes and Monsters was an early role for two-time Oscar winner Tom Hanks. Of course, he won the Oscar for Turner and Hooch and Dragnet. Well, he should have. You should have. Okay, it was Forrest Gump in Philadelphia. Hanks plays Robbie, whose interest in a role-playing game called Mazes and Monsters, which is your analogue for Dungeons and Dragons, takes a dark turn when the line between fantasy and reality starts to blur. Presented in HD for the first time anywhere in the world, so again, Blu-ray exclusive, nowhere else. You'd think just the Tom Hanks connection alone would have had somebody at some point, but hey, David's Plumeria, you got there first. Nobody can take that from you. Takes a dark turn. Presented in HD for the first time anywhere, this 40th anniversary edition is a must-buy for Tom Hanks fans and RPG enthusiasts. There's also a third kind of person that's not mentioned here, and I don't blame him for not mentioning it here. But I'll go into that in a second, because I'm a big Tom Hanks fan, but I'm not a completist, and I'm not really an RPG guy. I can appreciate the effort and things, but I don't have the patience. Extras, exclusive audio commentary with RPG legends, Seth Skorkowski, Scott Dorvard, Joe Trier, Veronica Escamilla, and Ewan Falvey. 8-page essay from film and games writer Dan Jolin, and English subtitles. It is region free as well, so wherever you are in the world, you can play it. A bit like Dungeons and Dragons. So here's your inside, which you get a better look at the art there without some glare from the plastic. A little bit of glare because I'm enjoying every bit of daylight. I'm Scottish, we have to enjoy it while it's still here. But here's your essay. And the disc art reproduces the slipcover as well. This essay is fantastic. 8 pages it may be, but by goodness, it is a dissection of this film for better and worse. And believe me, a lot for worse. What I love about Plumeria is they've released some fantastic films, and I think I've got them all, and they've all been featured on pickup videos. Sneakers I just covered with Jonathan last week on my pickup video. Soft Top Hard Shoulders, Peter Capaldi road movie, brilliant. The Hours and Times was the Ian Hart starring John Lennon, Brian Epstein, black and white relationship drama. It's not salacious, but it kind of a different type of romance, it imagines. It's not everything's like that, But this is a fascinating film to release because, yeah, you've got the Tom Hanks connection, which makes it commercial, but it's a disgusting film. a disgusting film, and it knows it. Well, it perhaps isn't self-aware, but Plumeria know it, because the booklet itself is a dissection of just how wrong-headed, nasty, cruel and vicious this film and this period in popular culture, and how the previous generation reacted to the children's interests were in dealing with it. I quote, a young man called Dallas from Dayton, Ohio, was a profoundly troubled, lonely young man. He disappeared and left a note saying, "If you find my body, please have it cremated." This is the true part. This isn't part of the movie. This is the true story. A detective was hired from all the way down in Texas to come and investigate what's happened to young Dallas. Tragically, Dallas died. Okay. But when he's doing his investigation, this detective, his name was Deere, something Deere, I want to say. Yes, James Deere? William Deere. William Deere, the detective, ignores the following. Dallas, the young man who kills himself, was already depressed, had always been an outsider growing up, and was always just a bit off. A lonely kid, a sad kid. His parents were incredibly burdensome and put a lot of pressure on him. He hated the pressure cooker atmosphere of college, which furthered his depression. He was bisexual and looked to be homosexual and struggling to come to terms with that. He was a heavy drug user to cover up his issues. He was into marijuana, cocaine, and PCP, including some home-brewed stuff. Now that's enough for any young person to be incredibly in need of help. Yeah, incredibly in need of help. That was all thrown out by William Deere, and all of the focus went away from the growing up in this background, the sexuality, the drug abuse, the family pressures, the university pressures. All of that was thrown out, and all they focused on was the fact that not even there and then, but weeks and months earlier, he liked to play Dungeons and Dragons. Clearly that's what done it, because if you looked at Dungeons and Dragons, it mentions hell and there's some demons in there. So 1982, we're now approaching the period in pop music where you get things like Tipper Gore and our campaign to have the parental advisory stickers. That was the compromise version. Remember, her original idea was to, basically, let's burn the books, let's burn records, and you had Frank Zappa testifying in front of Congress, and you had who else was it? Your man from Twisted Sister, and Dee Snider, a few luminaries, and they showed Congress up to be hypocrites and morons. Unfortunately, that was nobody involved in this production had the wherewithal to say the same. So they follow this book written by Rhonda Jaff, it's the Mazes and Monsters, and its theory that a young man's mind was corrupted by Dungeons and Dragons to the extent that he took his own life. It's disgraceful. The film does not go into half as much when it comes to what Robbie, the Tom Hanks character, is going through. Doesn't do the sexuality stuff, doesn't do the drug stuff really, doesn't do the family pressures. It doubles down hard on the Dungeons and Dragons caused him to kill himself aspect, or caused him to do what happens in this movie, which is a little bit different than the true story, but nowhere near, nowhere too far away from being the same level of despicable. Although at least this was just a film. This actually happened to poor Dallas, that poor kid. So we'll move away from that for a moment, because there are some interesting aspects about the film, apart from the fact that it's Tom Hanks' first leading role, first film. It also stars some Hollywood royalty. You've got Anne Francis from Forbidden Planet in here. You have Susan Strasberg from The Diary of Anne Frank on stage, and one of the great Hammer films, Scream of Fear. Terrific actress, she's in here. And then you have another Hollywood female icon. You have Vera Miles from Psycho. She's Marion Crane's sister. Was it Psycho 2 she came back in? Vera Miles, like, terrific actress. Stunning. So you have three Hollywood icons. Okay, we're not talking major icons, but you know, if you know your Hollywood stuff, you're going to know these ladies. And you have the young future megastar Tom Hanks. So that alone should be enough to drag you in. But when you see it, what you'll see is that this film is completely clueless. This film is an absolute abomination when it comes to evaluating the psyche of anyone who's ever had any bout of depression, never mind someone who needs excuses to be made for it. Dungeons and Dragons did not make poor Dallas in real life go crazy, as the film keeps saying. He just happened to be a Dungeons and Dragons player, as was de rigueur for a lot of outsiders at the time. Dallas was using Dungeons and Dragons to actually perk himself up a lot of the time. His friend said that was one of the few occasions he was happy and he could have a social network. It was on his own when he was struggling with his sexuality, when he was doing drugs, when he was having to deal with his parents and the pressure they put on him. That's when he was in danger of doing what ultimately happens. Not when he was playing Dungeons and Dragons. So the demonization of a whole culture is part of the aspect of this film that I love, because it's a time capsule of that. It's the House of Un-American Activities Commission for Dungeons and Dragons. It would be blacklisted, Dungeons and Dragons, if they had their way. It's deplorable. The quote on the back says, "laughably clueless," and that sums it up. So why would you want it then? Right, first of all, because it's a time capsule of that period, and like a lot of Red Scare things, for example, it's interesting to study that and say, look at what people actually thought about depression not that long ago. It's also interesting just to see Tom Hanks. I'll give you that, but it's interesting to see this massively reactionary, disgraceful take on mental health. And I cannot thank Plumeria enough for shining a light on it, because in this booklet even, I love this. This is David, thank you. It puts the numbers there for the Samaritans and for suicide prevention and whatnot. Prevention of youth suicide and the Samaritans and helplines. And gives you a link if you're international to go on and find help in your own country if you need it. Because this film is completely clueless, but the good people at Plumeria and the good commenters, and certainly Dan, who wrote the booklet, are fully aware that this film is full of BS, and that depression, self-loathing, sexuality struggles, drug addiction, these are what kill people. Not liking to roll 20-sided dice. It is very, very, very similar to the whole scare over the video nasties of the 1980s, where, my goodness, the Evil Dead is going to corrupt our children. Or, you know, yes, it might make them read a book and conjure demons. Or, again, to go back to the musical aspect, Frank Zappa's music's gonna take down the establishment. Well, I should hope so, because Frank would have loved that, and I think that establishment needed to come down, and they failed anyway, because the minute they started putting parental advisory stickers on things, and the minute in this country we started having the BBFC having to certify things, these became badges of honour, just like the parental advisory sticker. So when I went into a video shop in the 90s, growing up, when you saw that bright red 18 logo, that would make you go, oh yeah, must be something in this. So they defeated themselves through their own hubris into irrelevancy, where now you can't shock anybody with anything. To shock somebody these days, it's almost impossible with the internet. But these people were just buried into irrelevance. So it's fascinating to dig this up as a time capsule now and say, by God, look how far we've come. This kind of thing, not that long ago, starring megastar Tom Hanks. Although back then he'd only done what? I think it was in an episode of Happy Days, fighting fawns. A couple other things. But only 40 years ago, people were willing to say that Dungeons and Dragons, a bunch of geeky teens sitting in their room on a Saturday evening, was problematic. They should be out there driving too fast and drinking and you see where I'm going with that? Kind of joined up thinking of the early 1980s. So thank goodness we've come a long way since then. Again, can't thank Plumeria enough for this release, because I'm all about time capsule things. Even when I think the film itself is an absolute disgrace, I think that's parcel of the love of film, is that you need to be prepared to engage with stuff that makes you go, what? And then that helps you define who you are in reaction to it. And yeah, it's fun seeing Tom Hanks. I keep saying that because it's Tom Hanks. But yeah, overall, should you see this film? Yeah, for 3 reasons. Number 1, Tom Hanks. Remember, he was Pep Streebek in Dragnet. Pep Streebek, what a great name. With the Virgin Connie Swale. Number 2, if you are a role-playing game fan, you will want to see just how ridiculously they portray your hobby. I mean, for a while, Dungeons and Dragons removed all demonic references and references to the levels of hell, and then reinstated it later when they went, actually, you know what? Well, I was going to say F that, but to hell with that. It's a much more apt statement in this case. And they just put everything back in because, hey, they didn't do anything wrong. You know, I don't see anybody becoming a wizard because of it. And then number 3, I think it's just a fascinating document of reactionary, I hate to use this overused term so much, but reactionary, certain type of boomer mentality. I think this is a perfect example, not in the film itself, but for your reaction to it, of why that should be taken as such a, what the hell were our parents thinking? And also, the special features do go into that. James Booklet and the commentators tear this film down 100%, while acknowledging the good aspects. The fantastic performance from Tom Hanks, some really cool supporting parts, but the overall message of it is deplorable. But I think that's the kind of thing that should be celebrated. That we should hold up and say, hey, we've done better now, but look how things were not that long ago. And if anybody wants to make snap judgments about suicides and depressions and anxieties, dig a little deeper. It's not because someone plays, you hear it even still with video games, oh, they just play Call of Duty all the time. That's what causes them to want to go out and shoot people. No, the fact that they can go out and buy guns probably helps them do that. And, you know, you want to ask yourself, why are they wanting to go out and shoot people? It's not because they like video games. I mean, I played a lot of Super Mario as a kid. It doesn't mean that I was going about taking magic mushrooms. Ignore that last part. Anyway, 20 minutes, and a film that very few people have heard of, but mostly I want to just thank again Plumeria for this wonderful release. Thank David for his contacts. It's been wonderful, kind. Thank everybody involved for a challenging watch. I think that's a fascinating thing. It's great to have something that pushes your own biases back at you and says, what do you think of this? And through your own repulsion of that, it sconces you further into what you know is true. I think that's its own different type of fascinating. Sometimes you don't need bias confirmation from a positive point of view, you need it from a negative point of view as well. And this to me is that. It's, yeah, Time Capsule sums it up well. So Mazes and Monsters, it's amazingly monstrous. It's not a bad pun for being off the cuff. Thanks again, Plumeria. Thanks again to you, my friends, for watching, should you have done so. But yeah, leave a comment. If you're a Dungeons and Dragons fan, you roll some dice for me. Is that a thing? And if you're a Tom Hanks fan, then watch That Thing You Do for Me. I love that movie too. You doing that thing you do. Ooh, The Wonders, the greatest band that never existed. And if you're just here because you're one of my subscribers, I'm sorry. As always. However, enjoy your weekends, folks. Thanks very much as always. Stay safe out there, because there are some reactionary bastards in this world, and you will be judged sometimes, but remember, some of them ain't fit to judge you, so don't worry too much. You'll always have me. Love and mercy, my dears. Love and mercy.